Dog spent 4 long years waiting, and the events that followed will surely bring you to tears. For 4 long years, Charlie waited, always positioned in the same place, his gaze constantly fixed on the road. Known as the dog who never lost faith in his family, Charlie finally spotted a car pulling up in front of the dilapidated house. Could this mark the end of his long vigil? The ensuing moments are profoundly moving, but before we reveal more, ensure you're subscribed to the channel for more touching tales like Charlie's. The serene town of Willowbrook marched to a slow, steady beat. Its tranquil, tree-filled streets seemed to hold back the passage of time, maintaining a serene atmosphere starkly different from the outside world. On a misty grey morning, Charlie first made his appearance. His origins were a mystery. Suddenly he was there, perched on the sidewalk by a house that seemed long forgotten. Charlie, a golden retriever, had deep expressive eyes and a coat that, despite the elements, still shimmered with a golden sheen in the occasional sunlight. His most striking feature was his unwavering posture, resolute as if he was awaiting the return of someone who had made a promise to come back. Day in and day out, he maintained his vigil. His gaze stretched far beyond the immediate, as if peering through the bounds of time itself. The first to take notice of him were the local residents. They initially assumed he was a stray and expected someone to soon claim him. However, as days stretched into weeks, Charlie stayed put, always stationed at the same spot, his eyes tirelessly scanning the street for a sign of someone he seemed to recognize. He hardly wandered away from the house, as if bound by something unseen, something he couldn't abandon. Gradually, the community members began to reach out to him. Miss Dorothy, an elderly woman, approached him with a bowl of food and water, hoping to gain his trust. Charlie met her kindness with soft, appreciative eyes, yet remained stationary, only moving to accept the treat she extended. After eating, he would take a few steps back to the porch and lie down, his eyes locked on the distant horizon, signaling to all that he had claimed this spot and had no intention of leaving. As the weeks turned into months, the tale of Charlie became well known across the town, turning him into a sort of local icon. Children came to gaze at him in wonder, while adults speculated about what he could possibly be waiting for. Neighbors shared theories about the fate of his previous owners, whether they had deserted him or perhaps something more tragic had occurred. Despite the gossip, Charlie paid no heed, his focus unswerving in his vigil. His steadfastness won the admiration of many, and some locals even attempted to adopt him, offering him a fresh start. Jack, one of the neighbors, went as far as placing a collar on Charlie and tried to coax him away, but Charlie, with a look of quiet resignation, always returned to the dilapidated house. It seemed he was honoring a commitment, one that no offer or circumstance could persuade him to abandon. Gradually, Charlie wove himself into the fabric of Willowbrook's daily rhythm. It became a common sight, passers-by pausing to offer him water or food, and occasionally someone would sit with him, trying to tap into his thoughts. Yet Charlie never revealed his reasons, he merely continued his vigil. As the days turned into months, the mystery deepened, sparking even more questions among the locals. What drew him to that particular house? What did he see when he gazed into the distance? What fueled his undying hope? Grace, a lively and curious 7-year-old, lived just a few blocks from the old, seemingly forgotten house. On her way to school, she began to take notice of the steadfast golden dog who was always there, waiting. Initially, she observed him from afar, captivated by his silent, enigmatic presence. After hearing from her mother the story circulated by the neighbors that Charlie was waiting for his long-lost family, mere stories weren't enough for Grace. She felt a compelling need to meet Charlie face to face and discover for herself what thoughts might lie behind his watchful eyes. After a week of cautious observation, Grace felt ready to approach. On a cool Saturday morning, with the sun timidly breaking through the clouds, she approached the house, a small bag of treats in hand. Settling on the sidewalk a few feet from Charlie, she watched him closely. The dog noticed her right away, lifting his eyes curiously but remaining alert. After a brief pause, Grace extended a treat, smiling warmly. "Hi, Charlie, I brought you a snack," she said gently. Initially hesitant, Charlie eventually ambled over to Grace and accepted the treat from her hand. As Charlie nibbled on the treat, Grace chatted about her school, her friends, and her love for dogs. Gradually, Charlie grew more at ease with her presence. When she reached out to pet him, he closed his eyes briefly, seeming to relish a moment of tranquility. Over the following weeks, Grace made it a routine to visit Charlie daily after school. She brought along treats and occasionally a blanket or a ball, although Charlie showed little interest in playing. Still, he seemed to appreciate her company, and a trusting bond slowly formed between them. Grace would spend hours talking beside him, occasionally stroking his fur. One day, as Grace sat petting Charlie, she noticed a change in his demeanor. He appeared restless. He stood abruptly, walked to the house door, and pushed it open, its hinges groaning under the strain. Looking back at Grace, he seemed to invite her inside. Curious, Grace followed. Stepping into the house was like stepping back in time. The living room was cloaked in dust, filled with the scent of neglect, as though it had been deserted for years. Scattered around were old furniture, and a table cluttered with papers and photographs. Charlie led her to a corner where a toy box lay nearly concealed. He sniffed around it and gently poured out an old rubber bone, his name barely visible on its surface. "Charlie," Grace exclaimed, holding up the toy and then spotting something else nestled within the box. A small stack of black and white photographs, some tinged with the yellow of age. These were images of Charlie alongside a family, a beaming couple, and a young child around Grace's age at the time the photo was taken. A wave of emotion washed over her as she saw the happiness and love radiating from Charlie in these pictures, realizing he had once been a cherished member of a loving family. "That was your family, wasn't it, Charlie?" Grace murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Charlie moved closer and gently pressed his nose against the photo, as if to affirm that these people had been his world. Standing there, Grace studied the old photographs, sensing a deeper story behind Charlie's persistent wait. Motivated to aid her newfound friend, she resolved to uncover more about Charlie's past and the fate of his family. Though young and not fully grasping the complexity of the situation, she felt compelled by the profound significance of Charlie's vigil. A determined spark lit up her eyes, a signal of her unyielding resolve. Leaving the house that day, Grace made a heartfelt vow she would do whatever it took to help Charlie find the closure he deserved. Thus began a genuine friendship and an enduring bond between the girl and the dog who, against all odds, still held onto the hope of his family's return. The following morning, Grace was overwhelmed with curiosity. The visions of Charlie and his previous family haunted her. She understood that Charlie was still hoping for their return, yet she was puzzled as to why they had disappeared. Driven by a strong resolve, she committed herself to uncovering the truth about Charlie's history. After discussing the matter with her mother, who was touched by the story, Grace started to make inquiries throughout the community. She gathered several photographs she had discovered in the home and proceeded to consult Miss Dorothy, a longtime Willowbrook inhabitant. Miss Dorothy, who had always been fond of Grace, greeted her with an expression of intrigue and concern. "Miss Dorothy, do you recall who occupied the deserted house before Charlie appeared?" Grace queried cautiously, presenting the photographs. Miss Dorothy examined the photos with a thoughtful frown. "Oh, I recall now. It belonged to the Parkers, a delightful family with a lovely young boy. They left abruptly a few years back. I believe there was a dreadful accident, though I'm not clear on the specifics," she recounted. The mention of an accident made Grace's heart drop. She pressed for more information. "Can you tell me what happened to them?" The elderly woman exhaled deeply. "It's said to have been a car accident. Some believe it occurred on a road close by, while others speculate they relocated because of the tragedy. The complete details eluded me. Following the accident, the house remained empty, and Charlie arrived not long after that." Grace's understanding of the situation was gradually becoming clearer, though the overall enigma remained quite perplexing. Fueled by her recent breakthrough, she intensified her search. She queried additional neighbors and even persuaded her father to dig through ancient archives at the town's library. Together, They unearthed an old newspaper clipping that detailed a collision involving a vehicle that fit the description of the one owned by the Parker family. The article described the crash as significant, but offered no further information on what became of the family thereafter. Undeterred, Grace enlisted the aid of her neighbors to distribute flyers and post online pleas concerning Charlie, succinctly narrating his loyalty and requesting any leads about the family. The tale of the devoted dog who loyally awaited his owners resonated deeply within the community. Individuals young and old paused to engage with Grace, extending encouragement and occasionally bits of information that seemed promising. Eventually, a more tangible clue emerged. Mrs. Carter, a longtime Willowbrook resident, recalled a distant Parker family relative. This individual resided in an adjacent town and was purportedly the last known contact for the family post-accident. Seizing this opportunity, Grace persuaded her parents to bring Charlie for a visit to this relative, hoping he could shed light on the Parkers' current whereabouts. Charged with hope, Grace, her parents, and a few neighbors, along with Charlie, embarked on their journey on a bright weekend morning. The neighboring town was quaint and inviting, yet Grace felt a surge of nervous anticipation about the revelations that might await. After several hours of searching, they located Mr. Nolan, a cousin of Charlie's original owner. Mr. Nolan was visibly shaken when he saw Charlie, and as Grace and her companions narrated their journey, he covered his face with his hands, deeply touched by the story. He shared that after the accident, the family had endured tough times and had to relocate far away. He believed that Charlie had disappeared amidst the turmoil, but in reality, the family had been compelled to leave him behind, thinking he wouldn't make it. Grace experienced both sorrow and hope upon learning this. Charlie hadn't fled, he had loyally waited. The possibility of locating the family still lingered. Mr. Nolan committed to assisting them and mentioned that the family had settled in a distant city from Willowbrook. The prospect of reuniting Charlie with his family ignited a new resolve in Grace. Buoyed by Mr. Nolan's insights, Grace's resolve intensified. Supported by her parents, neighbors, and now Mr. Nolan, the group began to organize a broader search effort. Charlie's story had already captivated many in their local community, yet it was crucial to extend its reach even further. Grace crafted an emotional letter recounting Charlie's unwavering loyalty and the silent vow he seemed to uphold. She included some old photographs and enlisted her parents' assistance in disseminating the letter through local media outlets and, crucially, via online platforms and social media. The goal was to amplify Charlie's narrative to maximize exposure and, hopefully, to reconnect him with the Parker family. In the days that followed, a sense of expectation and nervousness enveloped Willowbrook. The community came together, united in the hope that Charlie would be reunited with his family. Weeks of collective effort finally began to bear fruit. The local media picked up the story, propelling it to a wider audience through online platforms and even a broadcast on a regional television channel. Throughout this, Charlie continued his vigilant wait on the porch of the dilapidated house, oblivious to the growing buzz around him. Grace made it a point to visit him daily, sharing updates and speaking to him as though he could grasp every word. "Don't worry, Charlie, your family will find you soon," she murmured softly as she stroked his fur, her own feelings a mixture of hope and anxiety. On a particularly wet afternoon, the ringing of the phone broke the monotony at Grace's home. Her mother answered, her hand flying to her mouth as she processed the news. The Parkers had been found in a different city, piecing their lives back together post-accident. Overwhelmed with emotion, they urgently requested Charlie's whereabouts, eager to reclaim their beloved pet. At that news, joy overwhelmed Grace, her heart swelling with elation. That evening, word of the imminent reunion rippled through the town. By the next morning, a crowd had assembled in front of Charlie's temporary home. Grace was there with her parents, alongside Miss Dorothy, Mr. Nolan, and numerous other neighbors who had supported the search. Charlie picked up on the collective anticipation, displaying a restlessness that was uncharacteristic of him, as if he sensed the importance of the moment ahead. The atmosphere charged with expectation, a car finally arrived and parked in front of the house. An emotional couple stepped out, and upon spotting Charlie, they hurried towards him. Charlie paused briefly, then, recognizing a familiar voice, he couldn't contain his excitement. He sprinted into his owner's arms, who caught him in a tearful embrace. Time seemed to freeze as past years of separation melted away in their reunion. Silently, Grace and the neighbors witnessed this poignant scene. Charlie joyfully whimpered, showering his owner with licks and nuzzles as tears mixed with smiles. His owner softly murmured, "We thought you were gone forever. We searched endlessly, but here you were waiting." The touching scene softened even the sternest faces in the crowd. Charlie, ever faithful, had found his way back to where he was meant to be. His enduring loyalty and love had finally culminated in this moment of joy. While Grace felt a slight sorrow at parting, she knew her role in this reunion was her ultimate gift to Charlie. Seeing the joy in his eyes confirmed that she had made the right choice. This moment of pure happiness was her deepest reward. The reunion scene was emotionally charged, blending tears and joy that resonated deeply with everyone gathered. Mrs. Parker was overcome with emotion, repeatedly calling out Charlie's name amidst her sobs. "You've been here waiting all this time, my dear. You never lost hope in us." She spoke tenderly, caressing his head while he responded with whimpers and affectionate licks, signaling his perseverance had paid off. The Willowbrook community observed from a respectful distance, visibly moved. They had been part of Charlie's journey for years, and witnessing this joyful resolution was more poignant than anyone could have imagined. Grace watched the heartfelt reunion, her emotions a complex tapestry of joy and sadness. Suddenly, Miss Dorothy approached, placing a reassuring hand on Grace's shoulder. "You made this possible, dear. It was you who brought Charlie back to his family," she whispered, her voice soft and smiling warmly. Tears welled up in Grace's eyes, but she managed a smile in return, recognizing the bittersweet nature of her decision. Although she would miss Charlie dearly, she knew in her heart that reuniting him with his family was the most loving act she could perform. When Mr. and Mrs. Parker finally let go of Charlie, they turned towards Grace with immense gratitude. "We can't even begin to express our thanks. Without your help, we wouldn't have been reunited with our Charlie. He's a part of our family, but now we realize he's also become a part of Willowbrook, and especially a part of your life," Mr. Parker said, his gratitude evident in his earnest tone. Feeling the significance of the moment, Charlie walked over to Grace and pressed his head against her chest. Overcome by her emotions, Grace embraced him tightly one last time, feeling his steady, comforting breaths. "I'll miss you, Charlie, but I know you're going to be happy," she whispered softly, caressing him. Charlie seemed to understand, settling at her feet and closing his eyes briefly, before standing again. As the Parkers led Charlie to their car, the townspeople said their goodbyes. Some waved handkerchiefs, others quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Charlie gazed out from the car window, his departure marking a poignant moment as if a piece of Willowbrook's heart was leaving with him. Grace remained, watching the car disappear around the familiar bend where Charlie had once waited so hopefully for his family. In the ensuing quiet days, the absence of Charlie made the house where he had waited feel eerily silent. Grace often passed by, touched by the void left by her friend, yet comforted by the knowledge that Charlie was back with his family, enveloped in love. This deep, personal consolation was something uniquely hers, understanding that Charlie was exactly where he needed to be. Months after Charlie's reunion with his family, his tale continued to resonate throughout Willowbrook. This once obscure town gained recognition as the place where a determined dog steadfastly waited for his owners. Curious visitors began arriving from nearby towns, drawn by the story of Charlie's loyalty. The town's residents recounted his story with a mix of pride and warmth. Grace, moved by Charlie's story, felt inspired to take action for other animals in need. She began frequenting animal shelters and initiated a campaign to promote pet adoptions within Willowbrook. With her neighbors' support, they organized adoption fairs, successfully finding loving homes for numerous dogs and cats who longed for a family just as Charlie once had. Willowbrook transformed into a community that championed the values of loyalty and unconditional love. In tribute to Charlie, the townspeople erected a small plaque in front of the house where he had patiently waited for years. The plaque, adorned with golden letters, proclaimed, "Here stood Charlie, the faithful dog, who taught us the profound meaning of loyalty and hope. May his legacy encourage all to never abandon those they cherish." This plaque became a cherished symbol in the community, and passers-by felt Charlie's enduring presence, as though he still safeguarded and nurtured the spirit of the town. Grace treasured a letter from the Parker family, keeping it beside her bed alongside a photograph of Charlie contentedly resting next to his owners. Every night she glanced at that image, reminded of the friend who had taught her the profound values of patience, hope, and unconditional love. As time passed, Grace came to understand that the lessons learned from her friendship with Charlie would endure throughout her life, a timeless testament to their bond. Although Charlie was now far away, his memory lived on in Willowbrook, cherished by all who passed the plaque detailing his unwavering faith and the heartwarming saga of his wait. Charlie became more than a mere dog. He symbolized a community that had come to understand the depth of unconditional love through an unforgettable vigil. Did the story of Charlie and Grace resonate with you? Feel free to share in the comments which part touched you the most, or if you too believe in the power of loyalty. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button to support more content like this, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay updated with all our latest tales. We look forward to sharing more inspiring journeys with you. See you next time.